Hogwarts Legacy is finally here, and is thus far indeed living up to and exceeding everything I expected from it. This game has a ginormous and feature-rich map and gives you a ton of stuff to do. When I first started playing, it was all a little bit overwhelming, and in figuring stuff out, I definitely made some annoying mistakes and didn't know how to take the best advantage of certain gameplay features and mechanics. Therefore, dear viewer, I am imparting to you 10 tips I wish I'd realized when starting out in Hogwarts Legacy. Hopefully these will save you some time and lead you to some more hidden secrets in early game. Let's get into it. Hogwarts Legacy's map, as I mentioned, has a lot of depth, with Hogwarts especially having multiple floors stacked on top of each other. When navigating the overhead minimap, however, this can get a little confusing, and you can often end up going down when you mean to go up and vice versa. Well, luckily, there's a brilliant feature which immediately overcomes this. Pressing V on a keyboard, or I believe up or possibly down on the D-pad, you will send out a golden line, which will travel along the specific path you need to take in order to reach your selected destination. This costs nothing to cast and is incredibly useful, particularly around this sometimes confusing but beautifully designed castle. Next we have the issue of gear. Starting out in this game, you will have 20 gear slots in your inventory, and trust me, these will fill up incredibly quickly. It can be tempting to hold onto gear you like the look of, but you don't actually need to do this. You see, when we discover gear of a specific style, it unlocks in our appearance tab. This is separate to the main gear tab and is accessed by hovering over gear and pressing F, or whatever prompt your controller gives you. Doing this, we can transfigure our highest level gear into whatever appearances we've unlocked, including hiding them entirely if you don't want to, say, wear a hat or glasses. With this in mind, you want to be visiting vendors regularly around Hogsmeade and elsewhere to sell off all but your highest level gear before your inventory gets full. Vendors, by the way, all appear to offer exactly the same prices when you sell to them, so there's no need to shop around for the best deals. But even with that in mind, constantly paying visits to vendors after each quest, dungeon or camp raid can become a little tedious, even if this game's fast travel system is super efficient. Therefore, in order to increase the number of gear slots in your inventory, you want to find and solve as many of these Merlin trials as you can. Progress the main story until you reach the quest which unlocks the first one pretty early on, then go exploring for as many as you can find afterwards. They're pretty straightforward puzzles, and after completing the first 4, you'll get 4 new gear item spaces, and so on with subsequent tiers. Sure, you could just travel to vendors more, but bigger dungeons especially could fill up your slots before the end. And whilst you can straight up destroy items if need be, you're missing out on a lot of gold by doing so. Speaking of gold, my next tip is to not make the same mistake I did by deciding you've got loads and spending it all on items which you don't need early on. After a short time in the game, you'll start to receive new spell quests which require you to purchase things like potions, a broomstick, and seed packets. I went and spent the thousands I'd racked up by exploring on fancy looking workstations and didn't have enough left for any of these things. Therefore, I had to go exploring for ages longer in order to earn back more gold to finally purchase a broom, which was annoying because had I saved my money and bought a broom earlier, I'd have been able to access distant locations a lot more quickly. So for early game especially, I'd recommend saving your money for when you suddenly receive a bunch of quests to buy a bunch of different items. If you're looking to get a lot of money quickly, then one of the best places to acquire it is from these eyeball chests, which are pretty common. They'll seal up as soon as they see you coming, but by completing an early quest with Sebastian Sallow, you'll unlock the Disillusionment spell, which allows you to turn almost invisible. It's not quite as powerful as the invisibility cloak, and functions more like chameleon skin, but is still good enough to fool these chests. Cast the spell when out of their line of sight, and then you can sneak up and open them freely. Another great way to find lots of gold and gear quickly is by diving down into the Black Lake, right where we unlock the first Merlin trial. You'll first be given a quest to retrieve a specific item for this Slytherin student, but at the same time, you can dive down anywhere the bubbles are to retrieve a whole host of gear. Unfortunately, we can't dive down and visit the Mer-People Goblet of Fire style, but who knows, maybe that will come in a future DLC. For now at least though, diving, ironically, is a pretty shallow but lucrative mechanic nonetheless. Back to unlocking the Merlin trial rewards though, as well as the rewards from a bunch of other challenges, these won't actually be unlocked automatically upon completing the required quests. No, instead we have to go into our menu and navigate to the challenges tab. Then you'll have to manually hover over or select all completed challenges from each of the 5 sections. Only then will you unlock your cosmetic gear, or indeed extra inventory slots from the Merlin challenges. This caught me out a few times and I kept on wondering why despite completing the trials, I still had the same number of gear slots. Next up, we have the puzzle door solutions. These bizarre doors scattered around Hogwarts all contain some decent secrets and loot, but the way to get behind them may be a little confusing to players just starting out. Fear not though, witches and wizards, there is a perfectly reasonable solution, and it's one that will allow you to solve all of them thereafter. Up by the divination classroom, we can come out onto these rafters and find one such of these puzzle doors. Next to this one, however, is something of a cheat sheet, which lists the animal symbols we need to input on these things as numerical values from 0 to 9. That's brilliant because now we just input the question marked number, which would make the 3 outside numbers add up to the middle one. Does that make sense? If you can't be bothered to find the cheat sheet though, or don't want to look at it in your inventory every time you're solving one of these puzzles, then there's an even simpler way to figure this out. All of the symbols are outlined outside the doors, in their corresponding order from 0 to 9. If you want to figure out what number a symbol is, then just count from 0 from the left. The final two are tips specifically relating to combat. If, like me, you couldn't wait to venture out into the wider world and wound up doing so before knowing anything aside from the most basic spells, you could very quickly find you're out of your depth. The area surrounding Hogwarts is pretty unfriendly in places, to say the least, and you'll pretty soon come across foes a higher level than you. Fear not, however, because even as a low character with few spells, there are some excellent ways to use the environment around us to our advantage regardless of level. When in a combat scenario, you may very often see when looking at items a key prompt. On keyboard, it's Z. This allows you to lift and hurl things from the environment at enemies, and it looks awesome. Though a particularly deadly item to hurl is the classic video game Explosive Red Barrel, which will very often obliterate even mid-level foes in one hit. A great tactic I've found when coming up on a base with a lot of enemies is to cast Disillusionment, then seek out the red barrels and try to throw as many as you can into the strongest members of the camp before you get into full combat. Hell, if you do this from far away enough, they might not even detect you, giving you time to recuperate, change position, and find even more red barrels to throw. And finally, my last tip has to do with the first damage spell we unlock, that being Incendio. As you may have heard, different enemies use different coloured shields, red, purple or yellow, and we'll have to use a corresponding spell from the red, purple or yellow class in order to break that shield and inflict damage. The problem is, when fighting enemies very early on, Incendio may very well be the only red damage spell you've learned yet, and it doesn't have a lot of range, shooting a bout of flames rather than a fully fledged fireball projectile. We'll unlock Confringo after a little while, which is a longer distance fire spell, but to those who don't have it yet or want to deal more of a fire AoE attack to nearby enemies, a great habit to get into is to use Accio first to pull enemies towards you. Once that's done, you can lay into them with Incendio without running the risk of wasting your fire spell and then having to wait on a cooldown. For enemies that are shielded, another great way to break their shield before using Accio is to summon items again from the environment, which, just like the corresponding spell, will break their shield barrier. I hope these tips help when starting your Hogwarts Legacy playthrough, and you don't make some of the same annoying mistakes that I did. This is an absolutely beautiful game, both visually and in terms of gameplay, and I can't wait to discover more secrets and tips to share with you. If you've started the game already, then comment below any other tips you found or interesting Easter eggs you've discovered. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Sam Bram, and I'll have more Hogwarts Legacy content coming very soon.